Never before had Shonen seen a female character like Erza Scarlet. Today, I'm going to tell her story as best I can, including the moments I believe make her who she is, what makes her special, and what sets her apart from every other shonen heroine. Erza's past is the backbone of her character, and in terms of tragic backstories, she's high up on the list. After her mother Irene tried to gain the power of a dragon slayer, she ended up turning into a dragon herself while pregnant with Erza, where Erza was kept in the womb for hundreds of years. Then, when finally conceived, to become human again, Irene tried to take over Erza's body. When that didn't work, Irene abandoned her infant daughter in Rosemary Village. There, Erza grew up alongside other notable characters like Kagura and Simon, until it was raided by cultists, and she was captured and enslaved. She was forced to work day in and day out building the Tower of Heaven, a structure designed to resurrect Zareth. While enslaved alongside Simon, she meets Wally, Sho, and Miliana. Two other important figures here are Rob, an elderly member of Fairy Tail, and Jalal, the character Erza has the most complex relationship with throughout the series. The group tries to escape the island, but are caught in the process. And while Jalal attempted to take the blame, it's Erza who received the punishment. And it's a lot. She's tortured so badly, they remove one of her eyes. Eventually, Jalal comes to rescue her, but ends up getting captured himself, and that's the final straw for Erza. She leads a revolt against her captors, and things don't go well. Simon loses part of his jaw. Rob sacrifices himself to save Erza's life, though this did awaken her magical ability, Requip, which is one of the coolest magical abilities in the series and allows her to protect the others. Her armor and skirt attire in this scene basically mimics what she ends up wearing throughout the series. She finally makes her way to Jalal, only to find out his mind has been corrupted and he's no longer the kind boy she knew. He's now a cultist himself. He's going to take over the island now, and because she took out the guards that were in his way, he will allow her, and only her, to flee the island, but she can never speak about what's happening there. Reluctantly, she goes. Because of Rob, she ends up joining Fairy Tail, though she wears armor to shield her heart and keeps her distance from the others. Makarov helps her get a new eye, though she's unable to shed tears from it, to which she says, "It's okay, I've already shed half my tears." Jesus. It wasn't until Gray saw her crying alone and pointed out that keeping her distance wasn't keeping her from being sad that she started opening up. She is simultaneously powerful and weak, confident and vulnerable, masculine and feminine, serious and aloof. On the surface, this seems contradictory, but there's internal consistency behind everything. And the fact that little of her character was planned out ahead of time makes how she turned out even more remarkable. Usually, character contradictions feel random or out of place, but with her, not only does it feel natural, you can make sense of it to a degree. Why would she love sweets? Probably because she grew up in an environment where she couldn't have any. Why would she enjoy smut? Because she's had a repressed love most of her life with no outlet for it. She's masculine, powerful, and confident in her abilities because those are the things she needed to be to survive. She's weak, vulnerable, feminine, and goofy because those traits are natural to her, and she's endured great trauma. This extends to her appearance, where she usually wears armor and a skirt. It even comes into play with her magical power. When Erza uses Requip, she simultaneously has this ultra-masculine armor that is designed to show off her feminine figure. This all fits her character seamlessly because it all stems from the same place. Her strength comes from the same place as her weakness. And the silly things that come from being naive all come from the past, which gave her so much trauma. The balance between these traits is constantly evolving over time and makes her so interesting to watch. A good example of this is how once she's in Fairy Tail, she takes on the role of enforcer. Having gone through the abuse she did, there would be a strong preference for her to adhere to rules and justice. There'd also be a strong desire to feel accepted. Fairy Tail is the biggest guild of rule breakers out there. but is also the most accepting, and you see which of these competing desires means more to her. This is a recurring obstacle for Erza. When we first see her in real time, she's built up as a fearsome character. Her ability allows her to re-equip into all sorts of different armors that all serve different purposes and have different strategic values that vary depending on the opponent, and it's common for intimidation to play a role in that. Honestly, she's got a stick up her ass in the early arcs of the show. She's always harping on people about following the rules. The first time we see some real warmth from her comes at the end of the Eisenwald arc. She's been arrested as a formality for damage caused by Fairy Tail, and Natsu, not knowing this, pretends to be her to take the fall, which results in both of them being thrown in jail for the night. And while the result wasn't what she wanted, she appreciates the gesture. On Galuna Island, when Team Natsu leaves to go on an S-class mission without permission, she tries to intimidate them into giving up and returning, but here doesn't work. Gray stands up to her saying she can't stop him, and she backs down. His logic and courage makes her question herself and if she's in the right. We see that when challenged like that, her confident demeanor is more of a front than reality, and as Galuna plays out, we see Gray was correct, and Erza acknowledges that. Even though it's against the rules, she ends up helping her guildmates out, and even destroys the moon. When Phantom Lord invades and Master Makarov is taken out, we really start seeing the cracks in the facade Erza has put up. She panics and orders Fairy Tail to retreat. The Master was her security blanket, her metaphorical armor, and without him, she loses faith that they can win. It's a level of self-doubt we hadn't seen from her to this point. And yet, when Phantom Lord attacks again, demanding Fairy Tail give up Lucy, Erza's the one who steps up to take the Jupiter Cannon blast head on, protecting the guild at the expense of herself. Lucy's been feeling a lot of guilt over the guild being attacked because of her, yet Erza says they'd rather die than betray her. It wasn't only Erza, but that loyalty to someone who hadn't been around very long and who wasn't sure they belonged was important to Lucy. That unwavering support also shows us, despite the cracks, she is strong, even if she doesn't think so. When Erza finds herself fighting Josei, she says, just as flowers don't choose where they bloom, children don't choose their parents, which ironically applies as much to Erza as it does Lucy. Still, in that fight, she's defeated. Rather than have him use her to hurt the guild, she prepares to sacrifice herself. It's only because the Master returns that she can't go through with it. We'll expand on this in a bit. We've seen Erza be tough, but cracks are increasingly forming in the front she's putting up. In the low-key arc, we get a great example of her lighter, silly side. She ends up with the lead role in a play, except she has terrible stage fright, and to cope, dives completely into the character, taking things way too far. And while it is funny to see this strict, powerful woman lose herself when taken out of her element, this is 100% a reflection of her real life. She's a vulnerable girl putting on an act to protect herself from dealing with her trauma, which is why when she's kidnapped and forced to go back to the Tower of Heaven, she asks to re-equip into her armor because it makes her feel safe and at ease. Returning to the tower brings back all her past trauma and the guilt she feels for leaving Simon, Wally, Sho, and Miliana behind. I'm certain she feels responsible for what happened to Jalal too, and it's why I believe she fully intended on dying here. She says herself, the end is inevitable, win or lose, and when her guildmates arrive, she wants them to leave. First, so she can finish things on her own, and second, so they won't see this version of her. In the fight with Ikaruga, everything is made clear. Ikaruga is the physical manifestation of Erza's trauma. Erza has relied on her armor to protect her broken heart, and she's been afraid to fight without it. Ikaruga can cut through that armor, and that physical pain mirrors her emotional pain. She straight up says, I have never been strong, but this is also when she realizes that her armor hasn't been protecting her, it's been shielding her from pain and from growing close with others. It's been a crutch, and only when she realizes this can she defeat Ikaruga, which she does by dropping her armor and emotional barriers and putting all of herself into her attack. Despite this, when facing the man she truly admired, and the face of her perceived failures, Jalal, we see her weakness once more. Her desperation to reach the old Jalal makes her an easy target to manipulate, allowing him to complete the Tower of Heaven. When Natsu arrives, he knocks Erza out because she's weak, fragile, and trembling, and having always looked up to her as a warrior, he doesn't want to see her that way. When Jalal has the upper hand and it looks like he's going to put Natsu away, Erza puts herself in harm's way to take that blast without armor. Instead, Simon takes the blast for her, directly mirroring how Rob saved her all those years ago. And after everything she's gone through, you know this added to her guilt and played a role in her choosing to sacrifice herself to save Natsu. This sacrifice is not glorified. To sum things up to this point, Erza is strong. You don't do the things she's done if you aren't, but she doesn't believe she is. She literally said that earlier. That's probably why she's quick to praise others while rarely doing so about herself. And when she's put into difficult situations, she defaults to self-sacrifice because she doesn't see her own value. She did it with the Jupiter Blast, Josei, Jalal, and the Tower of Heaven. Now, in a vision, she sees a funeral for herself. She sees the devastation her death caused her loved ones. It doesn't make their future better like she thought it would. When she wakes up, Natsu makes her promise she won't sacrifice herself again. And now she understands. You don't die for your friends, you live for them. And for the first time, she cries out of her right eye. And as emotional as this arc was for her, I have to point out how silly it is. One of the flashback memories for Natsu was Erza teaching him how to read or write. Because remember, Erza's penmanship is so bad, a thank you note caused a riot. After everything that happened with the Tower of Heaven, Erza could use a break. So she enters the Miss Fairy Tale contest. Not how I would deal with my trauma, but who am I to judge? Of course, this quickly goes sideways when all the girls are turned to stone as Loxus tries to take control of the guild. When Erza is freed, you can see that after what she's gone through, she's not in the mood for this. When she and Evergreen meet face to face and Evergreen threatens the others, Erza straight up says, if you don't release the other girls, I'm going to kill you. That's the darkest we've ever seen her, and Evergreen realizes that because she complies immediately. There's some stuff that comes up with Mystigan looking like Jalal, which catches her off guard, and she intends to find him, but then is sent to go deal with the Erasion Sace, where she reunites with Jalal. He has no memory of anything but her name. She tells him about the awful things he's done, and he breaks down that during one of these fights, he uses a spell that will end his life. That way he can end the pain he's caused her, but Erza demands he stop. She believes there is still goodness in him, and after he assists in stopping Nirvana, Erza says his memories don't matter, and that she supports him. Then the Magic Council arrives to arrest Jalal. Apparently, they haven't been watching the show alongside us because they don't realize he's being portrayed as a good guy now. This pits Erza's head against her heart. Does she do what's just or help Jalal? Again, competing desires. Natsu acts first, trying to save Jalal, and a riot ensues. Erza's the only one not participating, but her feelings are bubbling to the surface until she finally screams out, "That's enough." She tells her friends to stop and to take Jalal away. As he goes, Jalal remembers something, and we flash back to him giving Erza her name because of the color of her hair. After all this, she wants to be alone and starts sobbing while Wendy watches silently, which makes what happens next so much more fitting. It's revealed that Wendy's entire guild is an illusion, and she breaks down about being alone. It's Erza who comforts her and invites her to join the Fairy Tale Guild, telling Wendy she knows what it's like to lose a loved one. It's an important moment for Wendy, and it's not the last one between these two. To this point, there's been a lot of character moments with Erza, but Fairy Tale is a shonen, and fights are a huge part of that. Anime fights are at their best when they have thematic elements intertwined with them. This is exactly what we get with Erza over the next few arcs. Unlike the other members of the guild, it's not that difficult to see how Erza Scarlet could have ended up as Erza Nightwalker instead of living in the loving and compassionate environment that is the Fairy Tale Guild. What if she was brought up under a corrupt regime that warped her perspective? She's already the largest proponent of rules in Fairy Tale with strong views on justice. She really is facing herself, and this is holding up a mirror into what she could have been under different circumstances. It's the best fight of the season, and they're evenly matched. They fully acknowledge that our Erza has some darker traits. That also means their Erza has lighter ones. This plays into how the fight ends when Scarlet says that even without magic, they're still fighting, and that no one is dying from the lack of it. And we see the compassion and understanding of Nightwalker. The duality we saw with Erza and Edelus, and her truly fighting herself as opposed to a goofy copy, was the best part of that arc. An even better thematic fight comes on Tenro when Erza is fighting Azuma. He sought her out to test his strength and see why she's as powerful as she is. He was taught to rely on himself and removes everyone else, draining their energy so he can fight her one-on-one, and Erza can't compete. Azuma's individual strength is already too much for her, and he's even using her friend's strength against her. But that's the thing, Erza has never been strong for herself, it's always been for others. Remember, even when her powers activated, it was in response to Rob's death and to protect the others on the island. In real time, it might feel like an ass pull for her to take over the Tenro powers and flip the fight, but it's not. Those are her friends' powers on her guild's island, and plays into the theme that they have always been what makes her strong. It's an excellent showcase of her tremendous resolve. It's why when she's able to harness that and defeat Azuma, he realizes what strength truly is. The theme is what's more powerful, fighting for yourself or fighting for others. And this is fairy tale, so what did you expect? This makes Nurse Erza on Tenro so much funnier because she's so unaware of how inept she is at it when they have literal healers on the island, and she's straight up doing more damage than good. Moving along, the Grand Magic Games are my favorite arc, and one of these standout episodes is a challenge inside a castle full of 100 monsters and a game of strategy. Erza is up first and she chooses to face all 100. I love that moment. Is it dumb because she only needed to face 51 to win? Yes. Is it perfectly in character for her to take on such an immense challenge? Absolutely. Another key thing here is she's aware Jalal is now roaming free, and she must keep that secret, while listening to people like Miliana say they want to take revenge against him. Kagura straight up wants to kill him. This girl just can't catch a break. The stuff with Kagura is important. Kagura is Simon's sister, so she has immense hatred for Jalal. Erza explains Simon sacrificed himself for her, and tries taking the blame, and though she's fine being viewed as the enemy, she's going to fight back. She's maturing. Only when Kagura remembers Erza saving her back in Rosemary Village does the fight end, and right as we think things are going to settle down, Kagura is stabbed from behind by Minerva, who also tortured Miliana. And like on Tenro, it's Erza's resolve that allows her to defeat Minerva and send her packing. And then in Sun Village, we get back to the silly stuff. All the girls are hanging out at the hot springs only to realize the men are there too, and Erza's not embarrassed in the slightest. She even asks to wash Natsu's back. It's little details like this where she has this random hilarious gap in understanding that makes her so endearing. Or in Tartarus when she sends a letter to Sabretooth, but it's so poorly written that they show up late to the fight because it was borderline indecipherable. When Minerva returns, despite the awful things she's done, Erza shows her understanding. Minerva wants Erza to kill her and end her suffering, but Erza's been there and says Minerva needs to choose to live. It's a nice callback to her prior struggles with self-sacrifice, but that's not the most important part of this arc. There are times in anime when someone moves on from their trauma and then it's never mentioned again. Something I appreciated about Tartarus is that all the torture Erza went through at Kyoka's hands reopened some of those old wounds from her childhood. As I've said before, character growth is rarely linear. There will be setbacks. You can move past trauma but still be reminded of it, or still feel impacted at times. Erza was brutally tortured, and it makes sense that it would impact her beyond those episodes. It's also another full circle moment when Jalal is the one who says she will do what she's always done, remain strong, and do what's right. When the Alvarez arc rolls around, without Makarov, she becomes the 7th master unintentionally. She's come a long way from the distant child she was. Now she's more of a big sister figure to the guild, something I believe she's been trending towards since Tenro. This is best shown when she stops Natsu and Gray from fighting and holds them close, telling them she loves them and they need to stop. This sisterly role happens to coincide with having to fight her real mother, but like she said in Phantom Lord, children don't choose their parents, and there is no hesitation on her part against protecting the family she chose, the Fairy Tail Guild, from the mother who left her, Irene. Wendy Wendy being the one to help her in this fight and saying she wants to protect Erza this time are some more great callbacks. Erza was there for Wendy when she lost her family, and Wendy is here for Erza now. I like to view the 9-heart fight as Erza facing all of her failures and demons one last time. Simon, Ikaruga, Azuma, and Kyoka, doing so alongside Kagura, a former foe turned ally, and Jalal makes it even more poetic. To me, it's a visual representation of her moving past it all. It also gives an all-time classic moment when Kagura kisses Erza out of guild, and Erza is stunned. The relationships she has with the guild and how they've impacted each other's lives is such an important element of the show and of her character. Makarov is the man who took her in. Gray is the boy who opened her heart to the guild. Natsu is the man who opened her heart to herself. Wendy is the girl she gave a home, and Lucy is the woman she made feel accepted within her home. There's more to this, but with 328 episodes of content, you can only cover so much while keeping your own sanity. So how did Erza change Shonen? Many times in Shonen, females are damsels or provide their value with intelligence or support. Erza, she's more powerful than the main character for most of the series, and when females in Shonen are overpowered, they tend to lack personality or vulnerability, but not here. Erza has so many feats of tremendous strength and so many moments where she's lost, either physically or emotionally. All of this is what makes her so different. The complexity, the strength, the weakness, how endearing she is, how silly she is. It all adds up. Erza's creation showed there were no limits to how you could handle characters in Shonen. She's the woman who learned to live for her friends instead of dying for them, and she's also the woman who attacks those friends because they knocked over her cake. And since her creation, Shonen has never been the same.